Alright, what's up everybody? So welcome to another episode of lifting_wisdom.mp4. So bunch of interesting topics to talk about today. The first one is going to be about progression and progressive overload, and one of the best ways to view your progressions and one of the best ways to actually go about it. I find that one of the biggest misconceptions out there is that if you don't progress, you didn't have a good session, when in reality it's more so something else that you're kind of missing there. So I find that there's still a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to progression. So I'll talk about progressive overload and how to view your progressions session to session. The next one will be about losing strength on a cut. A lot of misconceptions here as well, so I think that needs to be talked about a little bit. And then I do want to talk about why I personally still control my eccentrics on every rep of every lift for the most part. Of course, there are going to be some exceptions to this, but generally people try and kind of downplay the importance of eccentrics just because there's a trend right now to focus more on concentrics, and I think this is another example of the pendulum swinging, and I think I have a good reason why you still want to focus on your eccentrics. I also want to talk about just a fun one to finish up today. Which muscle is going to be the hardest to grow and which muscle has been the hardest for me to grow personally, and I'd love to hear more about what you guys believe to be the hardest muscle to grow. So before I get into these topics, I have to give a shout out to the channel sponsors. So the first one, obviously Barbell Apparel. You guys all know them. The best thing about them is the lifetime guarantee. So they make high quality stuff. If you happen to outgrow something, you wear it out. If you happen to damage it in any way, they have a lifetime guarantee, so they'll get you covered. My favorite product from them is their athletic fit jeans. I'm wearing the 2.0s now. I'll show them off real quick. Black, just like that. So best jeans of all time in my personal opinion. I wear them 6 days a week, and maybe on Sunday I'll put on sweatpants or something. So I love them. Shout out to Boost Camp as well. So update for people that have been asking about full body programs. As of now, I only have upper lower or push pull leg variations released. The only programs I have released aside from my beginner program way back in the day they're all on Boost Camp. So I do want to be releasing my bugs are all over me today. I do plan on releasing my full body 3 times a week program pretty soon on Boost Camp. I'll let you know when I have a specific date for that, but you can expect it to be in the month of May, if not early June. So if you're interested in that, let me know, and I could potentially get it out sooner. So shout out to Boost Camp. If you don't have it yet, download the app in my description. You'll see it in the description of this video, and you can use the code BASEMENT to get Boost Camp Pro for 2 weeks for free. You get all the features in that subscription for a couple weeks. So give it a shot, and it will support the channel as well. So first topic for today, the one I have noted down here. When you go for a progression, so when you go for a PR within a specific training session, you're going for a +1, whatever you want to call it, your potential to hit a PR in that given session is predetermined. So effort is really all that matters. And it's a little bit more nuanced than that, but I think for the most part, as long as you're not a beginner, as long as you're not a newbie in your first few months, maybe up to your first year of lifting, when you go for a +1, it's predetermined if you're able to hit it or not. So the way I would describe this is your progressive overload and the progressions you're seeing in the gym are a byproduct of the stimulus that you've created. So what is going to create strength gains? There's going to be 2 main drivers of it, fairly obvious, but the first one, the big one, is obviously going to be muscle size. So how big is your muscle? How many muscle fibers are in that specific muscle, and how strong are they? That dictates how much weight that muscle can move. So that dictates your strength, and that dictates your strength reps to an extent. So that's obviously going to be very important. The second one is going to be neurological gains. So how efficiently can your body move in a specific movement pattern, and then how do you test that against certain resistance? And that's generally going to be at the start of a new lift, since most bodybuilding and hypertrophy lifts that we'll be doing in a bodybuilding program are fairly simple for the most part. While you still can refine technique a whole ton, that's not going to have a whole ton of change in your overall ability to move X amount of weight. So what I would say here is, if we go back to assuming your neurological gains are already pretty much tapped out, muscle size is going to be the determining factor of how much performance you can achieve on a specific session. So in order to see a progression from one session to the next, what has to happen in the meantime? Muscle growth. And if you didn't grow muscle last session, and you haven't been growing muscle, and you're in a plateau, you won't be able to see that progression. Now, to add a little bit of context and nuance to this, if you're interpreting this the wrong way, assuming that I'm saying you have to see signs of progress or like a +1 or adding weight every single session, it's not going to happen. It's not realistic. If you look at what that would do to you in the long term, you would be the world's strongest man within 2 or 3 years. So that's not realistic. Throw that out the window. I'm talking about being able to see a progression at some point. So a +1 or adding weight at some point in the coming weeks of your training. If you are unable to add a rep or add weight to a certain lift for an extended period of time, you're just not growing muscle. It's not that you didn't have a good session that day, it's that you didn't have a good session last time or the last 2 or 3 times, depending on how advanced you are. So the biggest thing that you need to realize is the one thing that's going to dictate if you're able to hit a PR or not in a given session is your effort levels. And that's all you can do within that given session, since your ability to hit the PR is otherwise predetermined. So bring your A game in terms of effort, and that's all you can do. So what you want to think about, the mindset to take, is train today like you're trying to hit a PR tomorrow. And I don't mean literally tomorrow. You do want to have a couple rest days between training each muscle for the most part, but train today like you're trying to hit a PR next week is probably a more appropriate way to put that, but it doesn't sound as cool, so I didn't say it. So you want to take this training session that you're doing today or your next training session and treat it like you're not trying to hit a PR today necessarily. If you do hit one, awesome, it means last time went well. Train like you're getting the stimulus that you need to hit a PR potentially next session. And what you'll find is that you're getting more out of your training sessions. Each set becomes more potent. You're not trying to rush through your sets. And these are all things that when you try and chase a PR every single session, your form will deteriorate over time. You're going to find yourself rushing from one rep to the next. You're going to find yourself kind of going half-heartedly through the first few reps of every set and trying to cheat your form on the last couple. Your set quality goes down because you get too greedy and you get too obsessed with focusing on the PR and the instant gratification that it brings you. When in reality, if you train and build yourself the most muscle mass you can possibly get from this given session, you will hit a PR next time. It's not that long of a wait. And you'll hit more PRs in the future once you get the ball rolling. So it's a more sustainable, better way to train in the long run anyway. So that's the way I like to talk about training. I would also add that when it comes to beginners, you do need to progress in effort. So when somebody like Greg Doucette says train harder than last time, most people can ignore this, but if you're a beginner or you're new to lifting, you have to progress your effort levels too. Effort is a skill to an extent, so you're not just going to be able to go in and train as hard as someone who's more advanced, whether it's because of a mental blockade or if it's more like a physical one where no matter how hard you try, your body just doesn't have the capability to produce as much force as it possibly potentially can. Then you have to try to increase your effort every single session, and that will get you closer from your current maximum tolerable threshold of training intensity up to your actual potential, like if you had a gun to your head or something like that. So that's what I would say here. I would also say that if you were to talk about like kind of the almost like dogmatic anxiety-inducing mindset within bodybuilding circles where everybody always has to hit a PR all the time, and anytime in like bodybuilding, power building, all this kind of stuff, people are they're addicted to progressions. That's ultimately what it is. And it's like, I'm never going to knock someone for finding a way to stay motivated or get excited to train, because ultimately that is incredibly important. But I think one of the things where you can gain a little bit of perspective here, a good example here is when you look at powerlifters, the way that they typically train, and I don't keep up with powerlifting anymore, so if there's some new better way to train, then whatever, it is what it is. But at least when I was into it, this is 5, 6, 7 years ago at this point, one of the mindset that most people had when it comes to powerlifting was, I'm in a hypertrophy block or I'm in a stimulus block. And basically what this means is they would dedicate months on end to just not caring about progressions, +1s, PRs, anything really. And they would just train for the most stimulus they possibly could. And ultimately, when you go about it right and you have the right mindset and you have good programming and good technique, it works really well. And these are the jacked powerlifters. These are the guys that pretty much do everything right. And for the most part, a lot of these guys will still have pretty lopsided physiques because they just don't have the motivation to build like the non-prime mover muscles. Like they usually have small delts, kind of overdeveloped traps, like kind of, some of them have oddly small arms, and it's just like, it's not the most appealing physique, especially the lats too. So it's like, I'm not telling you to go train like a powerlifter. Obviously there's a lot of problems with that too, but if you look at one of the things they got right, is that they could detach themselves with the obsession with progression and focus purely on just getting an insane stimulus for a few months. And if you can take that mindset they put towards trying to grow the prime movers of those lifts, then they're doing pretty well. And of course, when you take something like power building, or just like powerlifting done incorrectly, where it's just this constant hierarchy where you have your big three that you're always doing all the time and you're obsessed with those lifts, and it's all progression, everything, all effort forward on those lifts, and everything else is an accessory. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the powerlifters that do a meet once or twice a year and spend half the year plus just getting good stimulus and trying to grow a muscle without being addicted to those PRs. So when you can detach yourself from the progressions, spend most of your time actually building, and then have certain moments in time where you do say, okay, let's go for progression, then that makes the most sense. And when they see somebody that's addicted to PRing, not just their squat, bench, deadlift, or let alone just one of those lifts every session, when they see somebody trying to progress on every single lift, every single session, like, it just sounds kind of insane. So when you step out of our bodybuilding sphere and you kind of look at it from a perspective of somebody that is hyper focused on performance in powerlifting, but can also detach from themselves from that and just focus on building as much muscle as they can for extended periods of time, you almost kind of realize how insane our standards are when it comes to progressive overload. So obviously that's related to some stuff I've talked about before, but I hope that gives you kind of a fresher perspective on how to view progressive overload and progressions in the short and in the long term. It's okay to not hit a PR every single session. It's okay to it's not that it's just okay, it's actually normal to not hit a PR every single session. It should just be a byproduct of good training. And if you're seeing plus ones here and there just from a byproduct of good stimulus, like, that's what you should be looking for. But trying to PR and figuring out ways to cheat your technique and everything just to scratch that itch of the plus one, it's just, I think it's gone so overboard in the bodybuilding sphere. It's just not realistic or sustainable for most people, aside from people in their first 6 months or first year of lifting. So that's part one. Part two, let's talk about losing strength on a cut. So I hear this all the time where people are just hyper concerned with losing strength on a cut. And it's the first thing I'd say here is, if you're one of those people, it's actually a good thing to have, because it means you kind of put pressure on yourself and you have high standards. So to have a little bit of worry or anxiety or value tied towards your strength numbers, it's a good thing as long as it's not out of control. So the one thing, the kind of reality check I would put here, ironically enough, back to powerlifting or even just strength sport in general, if you're not going to lose strength when you cut weight, why are there weight classes in strength-oriented sports? So if you look at, say, I actually don't know, there's got to be weight classes in strongman, huh? Maybe not. I don't know enough about strongman, but let's just keep it to powerlifting for now. Why are there weight classes in powerlifting? It's because if you were to bulk up or cut down, your strength is going to vary. So that should be fairly straightforward to me, but I think there's a lot of fear-mongering about losing strength on a cut. Everybody wants to act like it should never happen, and your peak bulk and your peak cut strength should be mostly the same. It's just not realistic. If you look at any competitive bodybuilder that hyper fixates on their progress, and it is by far the number one priority in their life, naturals, they always lose strength on a cut. And I'm not saying, like, you can take two different mindsets. You can have one where if you're somebody that is going into a cut expecting to lose strength and kind of already like detaching yourself from your attachment to strength, you can almost use that as an excuse to not train hard, and at that point you're kind of like unintentionally losing or subconsciously trying to lose strength on your cut, when in reality it probably should be more of the other way around, where you go into a cut expecting to maintain your strength and you're just let down a little bit, because at least at that point you're doing everything within your power. But what I would say is you shouldn't expect to maintain all of your strength on a cut. The same goes for, like, do you think every PR you hit on a bulk is just because you built muscle, or do you think some of it might have to do with the fact that you're gaining a little bit of water weight and fat along with that? Like, you don't think that helps your PRs at all, and you don't think that when you strip all of those artificially inflated PRs away, as in taking away some of that extra fat on a mini cut, like, you really thought that was all real? It's just not. So Obviously, you're going to gain a decent amount of strength and hit a decent amount of progressions on a bulk just from building muscle, but a lot of it's just going to be from the fact that you're in a calorie surplus. You're obviously eating a bunch of food and gaining a bunch of fat and water weight too. Not a bunch. When I say that, it's mostly just exaggeration, but you are going to gain some additional weight that isn't just muscle, and that's going to help you hit more progressions and PRs. It is going to artificially inflate your strength numbers too. So when you cut, you should expect that to go away. You don't want to lose all of your strength, because that just means you're kind of back to square one, and maybe you didn't build as much muscle as you thought you did on your last bulk. But you shouldn't maintain everything. It's just not normal to. So it just comes down to the individual and the circumstances. So how much are you cutting and what lifts are you doing? But I would just say ultimately it's okay to lose a little bit of strength on a cut, because it is normal. Next one, third topic. Why this one's interesting. So I've seen this a lot on the more dogmatic corners of online fitness or social media bodybuilding or whatever. It's mostly just like the Instagram, TikTok types. I'm not on TikTok, but Instagram is just like it's like the sloppy seconds of TikTok, basically. It's just content creators that repost their stuff from TikTok, I believe. So I still see a decent amount of it on like my Explore page and stuff. So there's been an obsession with hating on eccentrics, which is like it's a little bit overblown in my opinion, because very few people are going so slow in their eccentrics to where they're hindering their progress. If you're extending the duration of your set into like the duration of time where cardio and endurance, or just like your mental engagement, is going to be a limiting factor to your set, that's an issue. But at that point, we're talking about like 5, 6, 7, 8+ second eccentrics if you're using a reasonable 6 to 12 rep range, and nobody does that. Nobody does that. So it's not even worth talking about, in my opinion. I think one of the benefits of talking about how eccentrics might be overrated is the fact that concentrics are important, and I think that has been overlooked in the past, mainly 6, 7, 8 years ago when I first got into the fitness industry and first started following people and trying to learn as much as I could about bodybuilding. Eccentrics were the talk of the town. People were like, well, you're stronger here, so this is where you're going to build more muscle, and you have to go slow since you're stronger to challenge yourself more, and eccentrics are where the muscle grows, because there's a study on people that did heavy overloaded eccentrics, and that built them more muscle than concentrics or whatever. So concentrics, you're ultimately challenging your muscle more. You're in a weaker position. You are stronger on eccentrics. So concentrics are very important, and I don't want to overlook that. But I would say that just skipping or rushing your eccentrics, it's just as counterproductive as going too slow in your eccentrics. And there's a few reasons for this, in my opinion. I would say the first one is just based on your positioning and your setup. So a lot of the time when you're trying to be specific and targeting a specific muscle, you have to maintain a pretty specific setup. So if you're doing something like a pull-up or a pull-down or any type of, like, let's say some variation of lat work, you kind of want to have your scaps, you want to have your shoulder, your clavicle, your elbow, your humerus, even just like your spine and your ribs. You want to have it in a pretty specific position. Like you have your setup, and if you go too fast on the eccentric, you're gonna lose that setup. And I've never been able to get good stimulus and maintain a good strict setup when I rush my eccentrics. In a slower eccentric, not super slow, but just a regular like 1 to 3 second eccentric, allows you to maintain your position without the eccentric taking so long that you're hindering yourself due to that. So it helps you maintain your setup. It allows you to maintain it not just between the eccentric and concentric, but it allows you to maintain it throughout the whole eccentric, and that way you can start your subsequent concentric in the position that you want to. So I find this important for lifts where your setup has a lot of room to deviate, even if it is highly stable, like a pull-down variation or a pull-up, or even something like a squat or a leg press. If you just kind of dive bomb the eccentric, your hips, your knees, they're going to get all pushed out of position. And the next part on controlling eccentrics that I think is very important, and this really ties in closely to your quality of stimulus from a given set, so it's very closely correlated to set quality. controlling your eccentrics sets you up for a much more potent concentric. And the reason why I believe this is because when you rush your eccentric, what you're doing is you're gaining momentum or you're gaining a bounce depending on the lift to help boost yourself in that subsequent concentric. And you could say that's a good thing to get a little bit of help and whatnot on certain lifts, but most of the time what you're doing here is you're just making a couple mistakes. The first one is going to be you're missing out on the more lengthened position. So let's say you're doing a bench press or a Smith bench, whatever variation you want to pick. When you come all the way down and you go super fast and you kind of bounce the bar off your chest or whatever, you can get back up halfway just from that momentum. And this happens to me, or this used to happen to me when I did do super fast eccentrics and I was going for strength. I would have such a hard time getting slow, grindy, potent, like soreness-inducing, pump-inducing concentrics, because what I would do is I would get up halfway and then you just hit a wall because you lose that momentum. So the momentum's good for getting you halfway up, but then when you're at your 1 RIR point and you're trying to do that and get to 0 RIR, what happens is you can't grind out that rep because that loss of momentum hits you like a brick wall. So you get there, you get halfway up, and then you get stuck and you can't grind. So when you see people in these generally high-level bodybuilders, when they're able to get a super slow, grindy concentric, and none of your training looks like that, all of your training looks like a high-effort set, and then you just kind of hit a wall and then you're done, usually that's just because you're not doing a good enough job on your eccentrics and you're cheating too much. And it is okay to use cheat when you do it properly, and I'm actually a pretty big fan of it on a lot of lifts, specifically for the back that happens to have a short biased internal strength curve. I would say, generally speaking, for most lifts, you want to have a controlled eccentric and it gives you a more potent concentric. So what happens here is if you control your eccentric on a bench press or a Smith bench, you are making the bottom position much trickier because you have less of a stretch reflex and you have less momentum to come out at the bottom. You can press up and it's very hard at the bottom, and you can just get a slow, smooth, grindy rep that takes a long time and activates every single muscle fiber possible, instead of getting basically nothing to attempting to move everything, but nothing actually budges, and it's like a half-second isometric, then the bar comes right back down. So you want those slow, grindy reps. And what I'd say here is, especially if you're going to that final rep of a set, or if you're trying to go past failure, you want to think about whatever you need to do to keep the weight continually moving. You don't want it to be something where you just get as high as you can but you get stuck. You want to start moving slow but still with extremely high force. The slow rep is mostly just involuntary due to fatigue on the concentrics previously in the set, but you want to be able to continue to move the weight and keep the weight moving, keep the muscle contracting, and then you can finally finish that rep, or at least get as high up as you possibly can. And I found that if I want to get an extra rep, going with more control and going with super high force with a controlled eccentric previously is always going to be the best way to hit a PR or add a rep, or get that next rep, even if it's not a PR, rather than trying to cheat and actually get that final rep. So I think there's another bug on me or something, but just a little spider. This guy's been all over me today. So the next one I want to talk about, just the last one, is this isn't going to help you in any way, shape, or form, so feel free to click off the video, but what muscle do you particularly find hardest to train or hardest to grow? I've got a couple. So for me personally, I've always found the muscles that you can just kind of like apply maximum effort and you don't have to think that much. Those are always the easiest to grow. And this is why I can't really relate to people that say training legs is the hardest, because for me, training legs is the most straightforward muscle to train. The lifts are all highly stable, highly standardized, giant range of motion, clear lockout all the time. You either get a rep or you don't. It's super black and white. So you can kind of just shut your brain off and just do the lift. Like if you fail, or if you get your rep on a squat or a leg press, pretty obvious. It's pretty black and white. If you look at something like say a strict machine row, where do you draw the line? It's pretty tough to tell, right? Same with like a pull-up or lat pull-down. Like where do you draw the line? Because they're short bias, so you don't really know. So with a squat pattern or a hinge, it's like you know what you're doing, so it makes your progressions super, super clear. And the downside to this, of course, is your effort levels have to be extremely high, and they're just exponentially harder compared to a lot of the lifts for the upper body from like a systemic fatigue standpoint. So they're super tough, but they're quite easy in my opinion to standardize, and I find that just makes it an easy muscle to train because effort is really all you have to bring. But when it comes to muscles like the lats or the traps, or specifically the delts, in my opinion, they're hard to train because your technique requires so much precision. It's so easy to lose your setup if you're not focused and paying attention at all times. So what I would say is the delts would be my pick for the hardest muscle to grow, just because your torso is so much stronger and it's right there, and your brain can always tap into it, and it's always trying to find more efficient ways to move. So not only is getting to good technique a challenge, but sustaining it is a challenge too, because you're constantly fighting against your instincts to cheat, and that will go for your entire lifting career. Like, no matter how good you make your technique, you always have to be focused to sustain that over time. So not only is it that, but it's also not a lift. The delts don't have a lift where you can just like hyper fixate on one lift and specialize in that and then you're good. Like what I did with my biceps, like I focused on specializing in preacher curls and my biceps got massive and sick. I had 18-inch arms. But with the delts, you can do that for the front delts, and then you have to focus on the side delts and then the rear delts, and the odds of you getting everything right and doing it consistently all the time tends to be a bit more slim. So it's you have more room for error basically, and I just find it tricky. And not only that, but your side and rear delts, which are like the most important muscles in my opinion for an aesthetic, well-rounded physique, those are the muscles that are just surrounded by the bigger, stronger muscles like the traps. So it's very easy to have those traps take over different regions depending on the side or the rear delts. The upper traps try and take over from the side delts, upper, mid, and you can even make a case that the depending on the lift, the lower traps try and take over from your rear delt work. It turns into being a lot. So for me, they've always been the hardest muscle to grow. Even though I've done it, they've required the most focus, the most attention, the most precision. So it's still fun, it's still enjoyable, I would say, but it's always been one of the more tedious muscles to grow, I would say. So I don't know what everyone else's experience with that. You could be the total opposite with me, where you could say, well, it's always been easy to maintain my technique, but the effort levels required to grow the legs is making them the hardest. You could be polar opposite to me, obviously, but either way, let me know what you think. Let me know what the hardest muscle for you to train is, and I could potentially respond to it in a video. But either way, I'm just kind of curious. So let me know your thoughts, and that's all I got for you. So I'll see you guys in the next one.